Time, just as a recap, we did a little bit of the sky. We kind of did it two different ways. We talked about the brick, the roof. So obviously today I want to show maybe some different materials and some different effects that we can actually do in Photoshop to make this again a little bit more Toy Story 4 than Toy Story 1. Because you know the thing that hurts digital rendering the most is usually that it looks far too real or far too digital, right, or far too finished, right. It definitely has this feeling of too finished, especially for studio. So the first thing that I want to do is, well, I wanted to show you that you can add trees and shadows of trees very easily, right, as a nice effect, and then maybe get to the sky. So kind of the same thing. However, one of the hacks that I've definitely come to is to literally type in trees in elevation PNG. Now PNG is really important because we get this sort of square background, right? Now the way to test that is to actually click on the image and see if it's actually a PNG, right? So for instance, I could go to open image in a new tab, and I can tell that this is actually fake because when I pull it away, it gets the background too. I don't want the background. So this is actually probably a JPEG and not a PNG. So you do want to be cognizant of that. And the best way to tell is while it's loading, it'll turn into a hatch background like that. You can also tell by when I drag it, it actually looks transparent. You guys see that? It actually, of course, looks transparent. In my case, I can drag it and drop right onto it. Now, I don't always recommend that because let's take a look at it. It came in really small. So again, I always want to open image in a new tab. Not sure where that is. And drag it from here, right? But, you know, in this case, it kind of came out the same. But anyway, it's not definitely, I can't say that for every single image, so do be careful. But we're going to click on that tree. Not that one, this one. We're going to transform it by using Command T or Control T. And I don't know about you, but I like to take it a little out of scale, you know, because after all, I just need the representation of a tree. I don't need anybody to again go, oh wow, such amazing trees. Again, I want their first things to be, I like this architecture, right? The trees should just kind of add to the context and really be able to put somebody there, right? So I'll hit enter to basically solidify that, and it's looking pretty good. However, the tree honestly looks a bit too detailed, so I'm going to blur it out just a little bit because it's in our foreground. So that's going to bring me to filter. I'm going to use the blur, and I specifically like Gaussian blur because that looks more like a camera effect. So obviously that is way too much. Dial it down just a hair. Because again, I just need the representation of a tree. It doesn't need to be more detailed than my architecture. Does that make sense? Right, I definitely want this to, and it does, look more detailed. Now that would be, of course, too far, right? But it kind of gives that depth perception effect. And then, of course, I can label it tree. And bring it down just a tad. Now, calculating the shadows of that would be really difficult, so the trick is to actually just take a copy of it, skew it. So in my case, I'm going to flatten it, and I want it to sort of hit the edge of my building, right? It's almost like I'm imagining the sunlight's coming at this direction, and of course hitting my building at some point. And if you know the distance between a tree, you know, you can kind of fake it till you make it. In our case, you know, if the tree was really far away, there'd be less shadow. If the tree is very close, there'd be more shadow. Does that make sense? Right, and I think we can all kind of go outside and look at a tree shadow and be like, oh, I get it, right? There's only so much of that tree that's actually seen. So that looks pretty good, we'll keep that. And all I need to do is actually trim it. So in my case, I want to keep this portion. So I can even trace my architecture. Again, if you did the Illustrator trace, you don't have to trace again. You could use the magic wand tool and be done with it. So I do want to keep that. So in my case, I need to select the inverse and erase. Right, because I just need that sort of shadowy piece, right? However, we know that shadows aren't the same color as the tree, so we do need to change it, right? I'm going to call this one tree shadow. And I can even group them with all my tree shadows and whatnot and be further organized, but at least for today, let's change it real quick. Oh, I guess I got the wrong one. Oh, it's still in my selection. Gotcha. Image, adjustments, brightness, contrast, take that brightness down. Suddenly looks a little bit more like a shadow, right? Again, further that shadow, we all know that shadows, do they stay really crisp or do they fade a little, right? They definitely fade a little. So honestly, the more you know about reality, the more that you can actually make it look like it, right? So blur, again, Gaussian blur, and there's a lot of different blurs. I mean, you can definitely test them out. I'm gonna definitely blur it out. Nice. And I'll pull it back just a little bit. If I wanted it to match some of my other elements, I could slightly make it purple. Right, I can go to color balance, add a little bit of blues to it, add a little bit of cyan, right? Really dialing it in. And you might not see that so much, of course, on the projector, but hopefully automatic depth, right? And nobody has to know that it was a copy. In fact, nobody will really know that it was a copy. They might put 2 and 2 together, but again, it'd be the shadow of that exact tree. So again, looks pretty realistic, right? So I'm going to take another tree, and let's say I'm using the same tree. I would change its proportions a little bit, right? I could right click, I could flip it horizontally, right? Just to make it look a lot different than this tree, even though technically they are the same tree, right? But even next to each other, you hardly notice, right? Because of the difference. You kind of start to see this little piece in there, but again, you're trying to sort of fool somebody, right? And this is, of course, if we use the same tree. Now, I'm not saying or recommending that you do, because, well, let's face it, the internet has tons of trees, right? We can further go in here and go, well, that one looks nice. Well, this one looks nice. However, I would want to match the detail, right? I wouldn't want to use a cartoon tree and a highly realistic tree and a sketch tree. I would want to be at least somewhat consistent. So at least my problem right now would be finding something that looks the same, right? And that's pretty close. We have a tree in the background, so we can of course go ahead and do that. We'll say that it's level there. Stretch it out a little bit here. I can even turn it a little bit. There's no such thing as a perfectly straight tree, right? Have you guys ever seen Bob Ross? Right? He just goes for it. The best thing to make nature look real is actually mess it up a little bit. Like, go look outside. There's not a single tree that's like perfectly straight unless it's been trimmed that way for years. Now maybe our campus isn't a great example because they've been trimmed for years, but let's go ahead and put this in the background, right? Because it's actually behind our architecture. So I'm not going to put it behind the sky, but I'm going to get as close as I can, right? That way I can minus anything that I don't need. So in my case, again, since I'm using an analog drawing, I need to minus it from here and trace it. So in my case, I'm just getting rid of everything that the building should cover. So I don't necessarily have to get the whole thing, right? But if I want to erase this part, that part, a little bit of that part. But again, I don't have to get it perfect. So erase, right? And of course get rid of the parts that I need. Suddenly it's in the background, right? We'll take that tree layer, tree, another one. And we'll take it back even further because why? Because it's even further away from us, right? So use the context to really build the scene, right? I mean, just similar to how we kind of have a little bit of color at the horizon, I could easily put some background trees. Let's go ahead and do that as well because it kind of looks like just a flat earth and it's just kind of falling right off. And we don't want that, right? We want a perfect elevation, and there's actually in this situation there's kind of a forest, to be completely realistic. It's sort of out in the middle of a field with a bunch of forest trees. So let's try that. Trees in elevation. Let's try forest. In elevation. Oh, by golly, would you look at that? Somebody's already got it for us. And it's a PNG, hopefully. Let's see. Liars! That one looks pretty cool. Liars! However, it's not the hardest thing to like make it into a PNG. It's just really annoying, right? That none of those are PNGs. So don't be fooled, right? Some of these aren't actually PNG backgrounds. Bro, go away. What? Yeah, definitely not. Definitely not. Well, maybe, or at least on the side it was. I'll take it. Anyway, let's go ahead and take that. Let's make it our own. It's looking a little green. Aw, man, there is a background. However, there is a simple way. So again, we use our blending options. Multiply. And kind of, right? I mean, it gets one of those squares. Voila. I don't know, it reminds me of the SpongeBob guy when he's like, bikini bottom, right? When it's just like sweet, right? It just works. Anyway, I'll put some on this side because again, I don't want it to be regular, right? So I'll put some there. I'll edit it first, that way I don't have to edit things twice. So kind of put it towards the background. All right, I could also just lighten it too. Maybe it's just too. Maybe it's just too there. Oh no, it's gonna bring back my squares. Never mind. Because of course it's in a blending option, so we'll leave it the way it is. Obviously, you'd want to find a PNG to really harness some of the things we do. But yeah, those trees are way in the distance. So just like the common laws of perspective indicate, that things of course shrink as they get further away from us. So you kind of want to keep those mentalities. I kind of like that ground surface in there, so I kind of want to keep that. So I want to line it up as at least as much as possible. That's looking pretty good. We'll go ahead and enter it there and go ahead and erase what I don't need. Now obviously I'd want to use a lasso tool and get the portions of the ground that I want. Of course I'm just kind of faking it till I make it. If you double click, it'll automatically close one, and you can of course erase what you don't need. So I'm going to fade that a little bit to the back. Not too much. I kind of don't want the sky too much in there, so again, I can go back to my sky. My erase tool is at 100, so I'm going to bring it way down and sort of just take it off a little bit. All right, so I'm going to zoom out because I actually do want probably something a bit bigger. Too big. But I kind of want to fade it out a bit. But it's starting to really look like it is somewhere, right? To say the least. Let's get another copy of that. I think it was this one. Go ahead and duplicate layer. Yes. I'm gonna go ahead and transform it and put it over here. And it's gonna keep those settings, which is really nice too. I'm gonna flip it horizontally. I'm gonna make it a little bigger, right? So nobody knows that it's actually the same one. I'm gonna tilt it a little bit because we kind of have a hill there. Enter. And of course erase what we don't need. So in my case, again, I do kind of have to trace it again. Unless I already surfaced this and I can get rid of it sort of accordingly. Otherwise I would have to go in here and of course erase it. However, I want all of this to be erased. I kind of have a secret method. I use the same line twice because you can do that in a selection. You guys see what I'm doing? It's like not exactly a closed box. We'll see what happens. I can always get the inverse, right? Fake it till I make it. Go ahead and erase. Awesome. I know I make it look like magic. But yeah, we're definitely starting to get some context in there. The next thing that I could do, you know, I could add a little bit of flair to it. I can get some scale figures involved. You know, I could even change some of the elements that, you know, maybe I didn't like. You know, I could further refine it. I do want to talk about windows today though too, because those are very particular to the architecture, and we've definitely talked about context, but maybe not so much the different things that we can do with the architecture. So let's get rid of, you know, those little sky pieces that are just starting to annoy me. Like I said, I kind of want that little glow around the sky, right? So I'm gonna definitely choose the hardness of 0. Because again, I want that little glow of separation. let's face it, these are super small changes, right? But yeah, right now, you know, I would say the other tree, the other one, is a bit too much. Oh, I like that one. Where's my other tree? See, this is why you always label everything that you're doing, so you can go back to it really easily and further change it. Ah, there we go. Again, I just need the architecture to stick out more, right, than that tree. And that's looking pretty good. So let's talk about the windows. Now this I may be able to use a closed wand. So I'm gonna go ahead and use my magic wand tool. And I'm gonna go ahead and make a windows layer. So I'm gonna keep it on that one. I'm gonna use my magic wand tool just so you can kind of see what it does. Now I've got to actually use the line layer. So hopefully I labeled it, analog, perfect. So I'm gonna try that again. It's W, right, as a quick tool. But as you can see, it doesn't quite get the window, right? In my case, I might have to change the tolerance to say, I think at default is 32. You can almost think of it as the higher the number, the more pixels it will take, right? So in my case, it shows everything, so I want less pixels. So let's try 16. Ah, there we go. See how it just got the window, guys? Right? Didn't escape the lines that were contained. I'm gonna hold shift to add to my selection. So I can add that, and I can get these little tiny bits too. As long as I'm holding shift, it's going to add to my selection. However, keep in mind, now I'm defined by this shadow, right? So I might not want to take it that direction. Well, I did one in, what do you call it? Magic wand tool. Let's try another. And I can still hold that selection as long as I hold shift, click. I can of course add to that, right? So in this case, I'm just going to use my rectangle tool. I'm going to be holding shift. That way I can actually cover those shadows and I can get right up to the mullions of this geometry. Does that make sense, guys? Right? You see how I'm going to go in past the shadow? We're basically going to get rid of those shadows, right? Or maybe replace them with our own, right? So we got a couple. Let's get this one. That's probably not a window, but oh well. Again, as long as I'm holding shift, I can really get all of the windows at the same time. And for the sake of tutorial, let's just do those. So we got them. What I like to do is actually paint it real quick so I can always keep it. And that can honestly be any color. In our case, I want to use it though. And when you go outside and look at a window, what color is it? What color is clear glass? Yeah, it's usually kind of dark and it's reflecting the sky. So based on those two principles, let's go ahead and add that, right? So the first thing being the blackness, if you will, of those windows. So I'm going to choose something pretty dark. In fact, I can even choose an existing color and then, you know, sort of darken it a little bit. I don't know, that's what I like to do. I'm going to brush, so I'm going to hit the letter B as in boy. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose a hardness that at least has a little bit, maybe, I don't know, 0, maybe 1, maybe 2, right?
Like a gradient or kind of a gradient color?
Don't use a gradient, right? And the reason why, do you guys see what I'm kind of doing here? I want to paint it in, but I don't want to just saturate the whole thing, right? Remember when you did the markers and the first thing you did was like fill in the whole thing, right? And that wasn't the answer. We kind of want to loosely fill it because again, we don't want it to look like Toy Story 1, we want it to look like Toy Story 4. And let's face it, there's no such thing as a perfect window. If you look at them, they're kind of slightly bent on one of them, and this one's a little angled off there, but you know, those things are picked up subconsciously. So the way that I like to do it is at a 45-degree angle, just like Bob Ross, and just kind of slowly bring them in. I kind of want some of these white spaces, or you know, a little darker in one area, a little lighter on one side. You guys see that? Right? And I'll be consistent. I'll kind of make the same area dark for each of those windows. But again, just controlling that hardness. Now, obviously, it's not going to do it to anything that I didn't highlight, right? So do keep that in mind. But that's looking pretty good, right? It's got a little bit of white in there, a little bit of darkness to it. Not too bad. However, keep in mind, I accidentally did it on the wrong layer. Uh-oh, right? So I definitely want to make sure that I do it on my Windows layer. So I'm going to do edit undo a little bit. Thank goodness for that. And put it on my window layer. Definitely important. Maybe get a take 2 on this. Right? It was even changing that color a little bit too. And we'll kind of make it darker in the corner. But again, I didn't just go in and fill in the window, right? A little anomaly there. I like it, right? Happy accidents. So that's looking pretty good. And then of course I can further change the color. You know, if I wanted to make it a little bit more dark purple, you know, I could do it. Maybe add a shade of purple to it. I don't know. I like those rich purples. They usually do well on the printer too. All right, so a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there, and a little bit there. A little bit at the top. But yeah, it's definitely starting to have in that sheen of a window, right? And so in my case, I can actually turn some other things off if they're sort of getting in the way, because I can deselect by hitting Command D or Control D if you're on Windows. And I can reselect this using my Magic Wand tool. So this is what's really nice. Once I have something, I can go back to Windows, I can hit the Magic Wand tool and get my magical selection again just by right-clicking and selecting the inverse. Right, so now I have my windows again, and I actually want to add some of my sky reflection, maybe some of that color. Again, very, very light and soft. I don't want them to be like, wow, nice windows, even though, yeah, that is a part of the architecture. But, you know, I want to blend it nicely, you know. I mean, there's a reason why Starry Night by Van Gogh is so good. What do you see first in Starry Night? That big moon, right? Right in the corner. It's bright and it's yellow. And it contrasts with all the blue, and then you see the lights on in the city. And what are the light colors? Yellow, right? They match to that harmony of the moon because it's the reflection of the window of that moon color, right? So there's a reason why that piece is so good. It's also very trippy if you look at it. The paint is marvelous, right? But really the secret there is a balance of color, right? So we kind of need to do the same things if we're going to achieve greatness in that way. So let's get the reflection. I don't have my sky image, so in my case I can actually grab a snapshot of my sky and just take it, right? So again, I can eliminate sort of everything so I can get a little swatch out of there. So I'm gonna get that piece. I like that sort of pinkish red color in there. I'm gonna go ahead and hit on sky, Command C to copy, Command V to paste, right? And I can take it and I'm gonna recall this window reflection. Now I don't want to sit here all day and do that for each window, so I'm just going to upscale it a little bit and make sure that I get all of those pieces. Alright, because I kind of want different colors in some, right? I can also shrink this a little bit, change its scale to make it a little bit more relatable. I could, that way it doesn't look like I'm seeing through the building. I can actually manipulate it a little bit more, change it up a little bit. In fact, I changed it. Why? Because, well, it's the reflection of the sky behind me. So it of course shouldn't be the same, right? I could get even fancier, right, and just flip the color altogether, right, and say that maybe the light's behind it. Again, I can take this a lot farther, right? We could really get real if you wanted to, right? However, it's in a good spot. It looks like I lost my selection. So again, just Magic Wand tool, click, select the inverse. I've got what I need. Actually, in this case, I do need the inverse. So, because I want to erase the sky that I don't need. So I'll go back down to sky. Obviously use a much bigger and harder eraser. Now, obviously I don't want to erase from the sky, right? So I need actually my window reflection that was right there. Get rid of it, and of course it left the pieces that are very slight in the window, right? It's sort of a little different color to it. We'll deselect that and we'll turn all this back on so it looks pretty again, right? Except for this guy. That guy's ugly. But yeah, now the windows start to be a little bit more realistic, right? They definitely have a certain quality to them that doesn't just, I didn't just go to Google and go type in window and then paste a window. I kid you not, there's somebody in the hallway who did that. Every single window is different. It's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. It's so weird, and I get why, but they pasted it up and then left, right? You know, it's like they weren't even proud of it. They're just like, just get it up there, right? Don't be that guy, right? So I can further adjust the windows, right? You know, if it was too dark, I could take that down. If I wanted to be a little bit more detail in that, and in fact, we need to take our window reflection and we need to put it on top of our window. Boom, right? A lot different of a situation, right? Maybe we put it underneath our windows. That maybe looks nicer, right? So never be afraid to kind of play with the layers in what you're doing, right? Because that one's at 100%. Obviously, if I take this down, it's going to get a little bit more colored, whereas I kind of want to leave it rich, right? Kind of match the line weight. Obviously, I don't want to get too dark, but again, keep in mind that the printer is automatically going to make dark things look darker, right? So I might not have to go as dark as I think. Hopefully that makes sense. Last but not least, we can add a little bit of flair to it, even though it looks a lot better when this is completely done. But another effect that we can achieve is actually taking the filter. We can go to render, and we can go to lens flare. Now, in this case, I can't do it to the whole thing yet. This would be after I'm completely done. However, you know, I did forget some things, like a strong ground line. Now, in a section, we could fill this in, right, the bottom, and sort of indicate that it's being cut. However, in an elevation, it's actually a strong ground line that makes an elevation look like an elevation view, right, because we're not slicing. So in my case, I can use the pen tool, which is somewhere. I could also draw it myself, right? However, I was pretty sure there was a pen tool. If I right click on these tools, you'll notice that there's actually a lot more tools than just what appears. So I have a pencil tool, brush tool. It might just be an Illustrator thing, my bad. However, okay, say we did it analog and we don't have a vector line that we can choose. Obviously, those of you who are tracing, make sure you trace a nice ground line. But in our case, we can fake it till we make it, and I'm gonna make my ground line. So in my case, I'm gonna use my lasso tool because I kind of want the bumps of earth to kind of be there. So again, I'm not trying to be absolutely perfect. However, I clicked way too fast. So let's try that again. But again, I could basically make that thickness. And it ends up actually looking more like a line than, you know, sometimes a line. I'm pretty sure there's a line tool in here, so let's try it two different ways. Double click, of course I can brush it, and voila, you know, we have a stronger ground line. So of course that's one way of achieving it. I know there's a line tool though. One sec. There it is, pen tool. Right, so of course we can use a pen tool just like Illustrator, which is nice because it didn't honestly always have this feature. Obviously you wouldn't want to do it on a Windows layer, and I probably shouldn't have, so I'm going to use ground line. And of course I do want this to be at the very top of the drawing because it is at the utmost towards the camera, right? And let's actually work on the other side. Let's go backwards. But yeah, this nice shaky line, you know, let's kind of mimic that. Right, so I'm going to use my pen tool and basically click as if it was a line, right? Similar to Illustrator. I don't know how we're going to do this. Let's try it. Boom. Or we can get all wacky. The line tool, you can get kind of wacky with it. And how I'm doing it is basically after I click, I hold the click. Right? That's how you can make curves and straight lines at the same time. This also works in Rhino. But just in case you wanted to know, right, then we can continue. And we'll call that, you know, the ground line, you know. So let's take that piece and let's change the path of it. Oh, where'd it go? So obviously I'm not very good at the ground tool. But if you change the stroke of it, usually while you're in the pen tool, yeah, we can change the stroke as well. But again, at least there's two methods there. Let's see, what else am I forgetting? Oh yeah, lens flare. So again, so this is more like a post-production thing. This would be after I was done sort of rendering everything. I could sort of further harmonize some things, right? So for instance, I don't want to accidentally erase all my layers, right? I definitely don't want to do that because again, I might have a studio professor that goes, I hate that brick, please change it, right? Great. All I have to do is go to a layer, change it, right? That's simple. So again, we do want our Photoshop file, so I'm going to go to File, Save, right? But I do want an extra post-production copy, right? So this is more like the image that I would actually print out. Does that make sense, guys? One's sort of like a workstation, one's more like the final product. So in our case, I want to File, Save As, and make it a JPEG, a PNG, really either of those two are fine. JPEG usually prints a lot better. We'll put it on rotation 3, we'll call it Test Post-Production, or Final Product. Right, again, just to be organized. And I'll go ahead and open that file that I just saved. I'll, of course, click OK. And go ahead and open that file. So open, desktop, rotation 3, and the post-production. And you'll see that it's really the same image that opens up, but it's been flattened, right? And now it's just one layer. However, it's two separate files, even though of course right now they look the exact same. So this is where I like to post-produce and hit levels. So Command L, as in loser. I can hit auto, and it's basically going to affect all of it, right? Which is really nice because I can either lighten the whole thing as a whole, or I can darken it a little bit as a whole. Obviously, I'm not going to use this darkening so much, right? Because the printer is going to do that for us anyway. But it's really nice because, again, I can further harmonize all at the exact same time. So that's looking pretty good. Let's say, I kind of want to harmonize the color. I could, right? So I can go to color balance. Vibrance is actually one of my favorite tools. I usually use 100% vibrance and turn down the saturation to about -26. Right? It has a certain richness to it, at least in the color. We'll go ahead and press OK. And we can add, tons of things, to be honest. But let's go ahead and add render and do a lens flare. So this is very common of, like, if you ever have a camera at the beach and you sort of point it at the sun, there's kind of these little circles, right? Have you guys ever known what a lens flare is? And we can make one ourselves. In our case, the lens flare usually comes from the sun, so I'm going to put it towards the direction that we chose based on that shadow, right? So obviously I'm not going to put the sun over here to the left, I'm going to put it over to the right. Maybe it's a little bright in the sky, why not? I can change the brightness, but we don't want it to be an apocalypse situation. Okay, so obviously dial down that just a little bit, and then I can even change the lens itself. Alright, so if it was like a wide angle lens, I could. Once I hit OK, it's going to go ahead and make it for us. Right? And if you notice, it's kind of these nice little highlights. Right? Obviously the one in the sky is a little bit brighter there. But let's see if I can find it. Again, this is kind of more for the subconscious. Let's go ahead and try that again. A little bit more, it's not very noticeable. However, it's not really supposed to be. So keep that in mind. I'm going to choose a different camera lens though. I want something to stand out a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. Again, probably not very noticeable in the projector. But when you print, again, it's that subconscious notion that, well, there's the sun in the sky casting this shadow. And it's really starting, I mean, this side's starting to look really good, obviously, because we have, material going on there, right, and things like that. But it's starting to really get there. However, I would say this is just about it, right? Obviously, I'd want to do this for just about everything, right? Because I have windows here. I could do the headers, I could do those in stone or concrete. So like I said, this is just a tutorial, right? And it's only meant to last 50 minutes long. So like I said, this could take a couple of hours, right? Even for myself who's really good at this. And very often, like I said, this is what I would charge maybe $125 for. And it takes me 3 or 4 hours, and that's, a good $600 per image, right? Especially after post-production and all that stuff. But usually these are the things that they're using in magazines. They're putting it on the front page, they're using it in their, those big signs that you see when they say like new construction coming. I'm always that guy, right, doing the renders for those. So if you ever see them, just be like, I wonder if Rhett did that one. You can tell which ones are done by me. The ones that look like SketchUp, definitely not me. Anyway. But yeah, you know, I'm just using Photoshop and I'm just harnessing the ability of what I know in reality, right? And trying to mimic that the best way that I can in Photoshop, right? Any questions about that so far, guys? No questions pop up? We'll go ahead and end it there for today and I'll get it online.